Jesus Christ bought an abandoned barn for $22, but no one knew it was for a homeless widow. The headlights swept across the abandoned Chevy like a spotlight, then vanished. For a moment, the darkness rushed back in, thick and unforgiving. Inside the dead car, time tightened its grip. "Mom, I'm cold," Noah whispered. His small body shook beneath a thin, threadbare blanket. His skin burned with fever, yet his fingers were icy to the touch. Rachel pulled him closer, pressing his head against her chest, counting his breaths, feeling how shallow they had become. Outside, the wind rattled the loose metal of a nearby fence, a sound too close to footsteps, too close to trouble. "Don't say it," Evan muttered from the front seat without turning around. His voice was low, sharp, already tired of hope. "Don't say God will provide." Rachel didn't answer. Her throat tightened as she stared through the cracked windshield at the empty county road. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, faint but unmistakable. Police or security. It didn't matter. Either way, it meant the same thing. 15 seconds. She had learned this drill too well. Run, hide, pretend they weren't there, pretend they weren't unwanted. "They'll make us leave again," Lily whispered, shame and fear twisting together in her voice. "Mom, please." Rachel's hands trembled. She had no strength left to run, no other place to go, no more lies to tell her children about tomorrow being better. Evan clenched his jaw, staring at the road as if daring it to offer an answer. He was 13, but his eyes carried the weight of someone much older, someone who had stopped expecting miracles. The siren grew closer. Tires crunched somewhere, far off. Rachel closed her eyes. In the darkness of that broken car, with hunger pressing on empty stomachs and fear filling every breath, she made a choice she hadn't planned to make. Not to run, not to argue, not to promise anything she couldn't deliver. She bowed her head, just slightly, and whispered words too quiet to hear over the wind. Not a speech, not a demand, just surrender. 15 seconds before the police would come. 15 seconds before another night of being erased. None of them knew it yet, but those 15 seconds were enough. Morning crept in slowly, pale and uncertain, filtering through the shattered windshield of the old Chevy. The siren from the night before was gone, but its echo still lived in the tightness of their chests. No one had slept. They had only closed their eyes and waited. The car sat crooked at the edge of a forgotten lot, its paint peeled, its doors rusted shut. It had not moved in years, yet for the Bennett family, it had become walls, roof, and shelter. A home by necessity, not by choice. Rachel was the first to move. Her body protested as she shifted in the back seat, a sharp ache blooming in her chest. She swallowed it down, reaching into her worn canvas bag. Inside were 3 slices of bread, dry, stiff, nearly tasteless. She broke them apart carefully, her fingers steady despite the hunger clawing at her stomach. "Eat slowly," she said softly, passing the pieces forward. "So it lasts." No one asked where her portion was. Evan took the bread and divided it again, instinctively giving the larger pieces to Lily and Noah. The gesture went unnoticed by him, but Rachel saw it. The way her son had learned to ration, to calculate, to protect. Childhood had slipped through his fingers without permission. Lily sat with her knees pulled to her chest, chewing quietly, eyes fixed on the ground outside. She hated mornings the most. Daylight made them visible. It made her feel exposed, as if the world could see straight through the cracked glass and judge everything they had become. Noah leaned against his mother, his forehead warm against her collarbone. Every few minutes, a small cough shook his body. Rachel pressed her lips to his hair, hiding the fear that tightened her chest each time he winced. They spoke in whispers, not because it was quiet, but because loud voices felt dangerous. A passing truck slowed, then sped up again. A stranger's glance lingered too long. Each sound carried the threat of being told to move on. This was how their days began, now counting food, counting breaths, counting the minutes until someone noticed them. Once mornings had meant school lunches and packed backpacks. Clean clothes laid out on a kitchen table, laughter over burnt toast. That life felt impossibly far away, like something that belonged to another family with the same last name. Rachel watched her children through the cracked mirror, memorizing their faces as if afraid the moment might vanish. She didn't know how long they could keep surviving like this. She only knew that somehow, inside this dead car, love was still alive. And for now, that was all they had. 2 years earlier, the Bennett family still had a front door that locked, a kitchen that smelled like coffee in the mornings, and a father who came home every night with sawdust on his jeans. Tom Bennett was a carpenter, quiet, steady, the kind of man who fixed broken chairs before anyone thought to throw them away. He believed nothing was ever truly ruined, only unfinished. Evan used to watch him work, memorizing the rhythm of the hammer, the patience in his hands. Lily liked to sit nearby and draw houses with bright windows. Noah followed Tom everywhere, small fingers clinging to his leg, convinced his father could fix anything. The fire came on a humid June night. An electrical short in the kitchen sparked while everyone slept. Smoke filled the house before the alarms could scream. Tom was the first to wake. He shook Rachel, shouted the children's names, and dragged Evan and Lily toward the door. Outside, neighbors gathered in panic, orange flames licking at the windows. Then Tom realized Noah wasn't there. Rachel tried to go back inside. She fought the hands holding her back, screaming until her voice tore apart. Evan stood frozen on the lawn, gripping Lily's hands so tightly her fingers went numb. Tom didn't hesitate. He ran straight into the fire. Moments later, he burst back out with Noah in his arms, his clothes burning, his skin already blistered. He collapsed before reaching the ambulance. As paramedics worked frantically, he found Rachel's eyes through the chaos. "Keep them safe," he whispered. "Promise me." He died 3 hours later at the hospital. Third-degree burns over most of his body. The doctors said there was nothing more they could do. Rachel kept her promise. She kept it through the funeral, through the weeks of paperwork and hospital bills that swallowed everything they had saved. Insurance covered some of the damage, but not the debt, not the months without income, not the future Tom had been building with his hands. They moved from rentals they couldn't afford to, couches they overstayed, then to shelters with rules they couldn't meet. Eventually, to places no one wanted until even those ran out. Evan stopped talking about school. Lily learned to pack and unpack in minutes. Noah started waking up, crying at night, coughing in his sleep. And every time Rachel passed a half-built house or a stack of lumber, she felt the echo of a man who once believed that broken things could always be made new. She held on to that belief, even as everything around her turned to ash. Evan noticed the blood before anyone else did. It was early evening, the sky already turning gray, when Rachel pressed a crumpled paper towel to her mouth and turned toward the door of the Chevy, pretending to look for something outside. Evan saw the way her shoulders tightened, the way she stayed turned just a second too long. When she came back, he reached for the paper towel and unfolded it. Read, "Not a lot, but enough." "How long?" Evan asked. His voice didn't sound like a child's anymore. It sounded sharp, almost accusing. Rachel froze. "It's nothing," she said too quickly. "Just a cough." Evan laughed. A short, bitter sound that startled Lily. "You think I don't see it? You think I'm stupid?" Rachel reached for him. "Evan." "No." He pulled away. His hands were shaking now, fists clenched so tight his knuckles went white. "You work yourself sick. You don't eat. You lie to us every day. And you still say he's watching us?" Lily hugged her knees tighter, eyes darting between them. Noah whimpered softly, sensing the shift in the air. Rachel swallowed. "God hasn't abandoned us." That was when it broke. Evan turned on her, tears burning in his eyes, anger spilling out like something that had been trapped too long. "Then where was Jesus when Dad died?" he shouted. "Where was he when our house burned down? When Mom started coughing up blood? When we started sleeping in a junk car like we don't matter?" His voice cracked, but he didn't stop. "You tell us to pray. You tell us to wait. We waited. We prayed. And nothing changed." The words hung heavy inside the car, pressing against the metal walls. Rachel tried to speak, but no answer came, because part of her understood. Every night she asked the same questions in silence. Every morning she chose faith again with hands that were growing weaker. Evan turned away, wiping his face roughly. "I'm done believing in miracles," he muttered. "Miracles are for people who already have something." Rachel watched her son's back, the way it curved inward like he was carrying a weight no 13-year-old should bear. She wanted to pull him close, to promise safety, to swear that God would fix everything. But promises had become dangerous things, so she did the only thing she could. She reached across the seat and took Evan's hand anyway. He didn't pull away this time. His grip tightened, just slightly, like a child still hoping to be proven wrong. Outside, the wind pushed against the empty lot. Inside the dead car, faith didn't disappear, but it fractured, waiting to be tested by whatever came next. Long after the traffic died down and the lot sank back into silence, the children finally drifted into an uneasy sleep. Their breathing was shallow, uneven, shaped by hunger and cold. Rachel waited until she was sure they wouldn't wake, then carefully eased the car door open. The night air hit her like ice. She stepped a few yards away from the Chevy, far enough that her children couldn't hear her voice break. The sky above Scranton was clear and merciless, stars scattered like distant witnesses. Her knees gave out before she realized she had stopped walking. She knelt on the frozen ground. The pain in her chest flared as she bent forward. One hand braced against the earth. For a moment, she couldn't speak. She just breathed slow, shallow breaths, until the trembling in her hands began to calm. "Heavenly Father," she whispered at last. The words felt small against the weight of the night. There was no eloquence left in her, no carefully memorized prayers from Sunday mornings long ago. Only exhaustion, only truth. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," she said, her voice barely carrying past her lips. "I'm trying. I really am. But I'm failing them." Tears slipped down her face and disappeared into the dirt. "My children are hungry. Noah is sick. Evan is losing his faith, and I don't know how to give it back to him." Her voice broke. "Lily is learning to be ashamed of who she is, and that's my fault." She pressed her forehead to the ground. "I'm not asking for comfort," she continued. "I'm not asking for an easy life." Her breath hitched. "If someone has to break, let it be me. Just don't let it be them." The wind moved through the weeds, carrying her words into the darkness. No thunder answered. No light broke through the clouds. Rachel coughed hard, the metallic taste blooming again in her mouth. She swallowed it down, fear tightening in her chest. "I'm so tired, Lord," she whispered. "Please, don't let me lose my faith too. If I stop believing, then we're truly lost." She stayed there for a long time, long enough for her knees to go numb, long enough for the tears to dry on her cheeks. When she finally stood, her legs trembled beneath her. Nothing had changed. The car was still dark. Her children were still hungry. The night was still cold. But as Rachel turned back toward the Chevy, something unseen had already begun to move. Not with noise, not with fire, but with purpose. Dawn arrived quietly, without promise or warmth. A thin gray light crept over the abandoned lot, revealing what the night had hidden: rusted metal, scattered trash, and a family still trapped where no one meant to stay. Rachel woke to the sound of Noah, coughing against her chest. She reached up to feel his forehead and felt the heat. Immediately, too warm. Her stomach tightened with fear. She pushed it aside, forcing herself to sit up. That was when the knock came. Soft, careful. Not the sharp bang of authority or the impatient rattle of someone looking to move them along. Just a single gentle tap against the cracked window. All three children startled awake. Evan's body went rigid. Instinctively, he shifted forward, placing himself between the sound and his siblings. Lily's hand found Rachel's arm, her grip tight and silent. Noah whimpered, pulling the blanket closer. Rachel turned slowly. A man stood outside the car, hands visible, posture relaxed. He looked to be in his early 50s, dressed like someone who worked with his body-worn boots, dusted with dirt, faded jeans, a flannel shirt with frayed cuffs. His face was lined, but not hardened. There was something steady about him, something that didn't demand attention but held it anyway. Rachel cracked the door just enough to speak. "Can I help you?" The man met her eyes, and for a brief moment, it felt as if he saw everything. The hunger, the fear, the prayer whispered into the night. There was no surprise in his expression, only understanding. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm, warm. "I'm sorry to bother you so early." Evan didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on the stranger, wary, assessing. "I know this isn't a good place for children," the man continued gently, "and I know you're trying to keep them safe." Rachel's breath caught. She hadn't said a word, yet he spoke as if he already knew. "My name's Caleb," he added. "I think I can help." Rachel hesitated. She had learned to be careful with hope, careful with kindness that came too easily. "Help how?" she asked. Caleb glanced past her, noticing Noah's flushed face, Lily's bare feet, Evan's clenched jaw. He didn't stare. He didn't pity. He simply nodded, as if confirming something he had already decided. I know a place, he said. Not far from here. Evan shook his head sharply. We don't go with strangers. Caleb smiled. Not offended, not dismissive. That's good, he said. You shouldn't. He looked back at Rachel. But Somenheim's help comes from someone you haven't met yet. The morning air hung between them, still and fragile. Rachel felt it then. The quiet sense that the night's prayer had not vanished into silence. Something had answered. Rachel listened without interrupting, as the man explained, himself. They stood beside the dead Chevy, while the morning slowly warmed the air, the children hovering close enough to hear every word. A place? Rachel asked carefully. Is it a shelter? Caleb shook his head. No rules. No lines. An apartment? Evan cut in. Because we don't have money for deposits. Caleb met Evan's gaze without flinching. I'm not asking you for rent. Rachel's guard went up instantly. She had heard this tone before offers that sounded generous and ended badly. Then what do you want? She asked flatly. Caleb exhaled as if he had expected the question. I bought a barn, he said simply. Silence followed. A barn? Lily echoed, confused. Caleb nodded. An old one. Been sitting empty for years, out past the county line. He hesitated, then added, almost casually, cost me $22. Owner just wanted it gone. Evan let out a sharp breath, half laugh, half disbelief. That's supposed to help? Rachel crossed her arms. Sir, I have 3 children. A barn isn't a home. I know, Caleb said. Not yet. She studied his face, searching for signs of mockery, of pity, of deception. She found none. Only a quiet certainty that unsettled her more than suspicion ever had. What's the catch? She asked. There isn't one, Caleb replied. Then, seeing the doubt in her eyes, he corrected himself. There is work. He gestured with his hands, rough palms open. The place needs repairs, roof leaks, walls are weak, floors nothing but dirt. I can't do it alone. Evan stiffened. You want us to fix it? I want us to fix it, Caleb said. Together. Rachel shook her head slowly. We can't afford materials, tools, food. We can barely afford. I'll handle what I can, Caleb interrupted gently. What I can't, we'll figure out. Evan stepped forward. And after? When it's done? Caleb didn't hesitate. Then it's yours. The word hung in the air. Yours. Rachel felt her chest tighten, not with hope, but with fear. She had learned that believing was dangerous. Believing was how you fell harder. I don't take charity, she said quietly. Caleb's voice remained steady. Neither do I. He looked at Evan again. You protect your family. That's clear. I respect that. Then he turned back to Rachel. This isn't charity. It's an exchange. You work, I work. You build something with your hands. When it's finished, you keep it. Rachel glanced at her children. Noah leaned weakly against her side. Lily watched with cautious hope. Evan's jaw was tight, but his eyes flickered with something he hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility, Rachel swallowed. And if we say no? Caleb nodded. Then I'll wish you well and keep walking. The choice was hers. And somehow, impossibly, it felt like more than coincidence that it had arrived this morning. The drive took nearly an hour, the road narrowing until pavement gave way to gravel and then to dirt. Fields stretched out on both sides, quiet and empty, broken only by leaning fences and scattered trees. No one spoke. Hope, once invited into the car, now sat stiff and fragile between them. When Caleb finally slowed the truck and turned off the engine, Rachel felt it before she saw it. The barn stood alone at the edge of a field, listing to one side like a tired animal ready to collapse. Its wood was dark with rot. Entire sections of the roof were gone, open to the sky. What windows remained were shattered or missing altogether. This was it. Lily climbed down from the truck and froze. We're supposed to live here? She whispered, her voice trembling. Noah began to cry, clinging to Rachel's coat. The smell hit them. Next damp earth, mold, animal waste. Rachel's stomach turned. Evan took one step forward, then stopped. His face flushed with anger. You brought us all this way for this? He snapped, spinning toward Caleb. This isn't a place, it's a joke. Rachel felt the sting of humiliation burn through her chest. She had let herself believe just a little. that this might be real, that maybe for once help had come without strings. She gathered the children around her, arms tight, protective. "I can't do this," she said, her voice shaking. "This is worse than the car." Caleb said nothing at first. He stood there, letting the disappointment crash over them, letting the tears fall where they may. He didn't rush to explain. He didn't defend himself. Evan's anger spilled over. "You said you could help," he shouted. "You said—" "I know what I said," Caleb replied quietly. Rachel looked at the barn again. At the sagging beams, the holes in the walls, the ground beneath their feet, the weight of everything she had been carrying pressed down hard. She bowed her head, voice breaking. "Is this what that prayer was for?" she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "Is this the answer?" Lily hid her face. Noah sobbed harder. Then Caleb moved. He knelt down in the dirt until he was level with the children, his knees sinking into the mud. He looked at each of them, one by one, his eyes steady, unshaken. "This," he said gently, gesturing toward the ruined barn, "is not what it will be." Rachel looked up, tears streaking her face. "It's destroyed." Caleb nodded. "Yes, right now." He met her gaze, and his voice carried a calm certainty that cut through the chaos. "There's a difference between what something is and what it's becoming." The field was silent again. Hope didn't return yet, but it stopped running away. The first morning began before sunrise. Cold air clung to the field as Caleb arrived in his truck, the bed loaded with tools that looked older than the barn itself. Hammers worn smooth by years of use, coils of rope, salvaged boards stacked with care. He didn't waste time with speeches. "The roof comes first," he said, unrolling a hand-drawn sketch on the hood. "Without it, nothing else matters." Evan crossed his arms, still stiff with doubt. "I don't know how to build." Caleb handed him a hammer. "You will." The sound of metal striking wood echoed across the field. Awkward at first, then steadier. Evan's hands blistered quickly, but he didn't complain. Caleb showed him how to measure twice, how to swing without fear, how to let the weight of the tool do the work. He corrected without shouting, guided without humiliating. Rachel worked beside them, clearing debris, hauling rotted planks away from the walls. Her arms burned, her chest tightened, but she kept moving. Each board removed felt like a small defiance against everything that had told her to give up. Caleb noticed when she swayed. "Rest," he said more than once. "I can't," Rachel replied. "This matters." Lily and Noah were given simple tasks collecting nails, pulling weeds from the patch of ground behind the barn where Caleb said a garden would go someday. The children took their work seriously, as if every small job proved they belonged there. At midday, Caleb pulled a pot from the truck and set it over a small fire. Soup hot, real, filling. No one asked where it came from. No one questioned how he always seemed to have enough. By the end of the first week, the roof no longer leaked. Fresh boards replaced the weakest walls. At night, the barn was still cold, still rough, but it held. Something else was changing too. Evan began to stand taller, pride flickering behind his exhaustion. Lily hummed softly while sorting tools, her fear loosening its grip. Noah's cough softened, his appetite returning in small but hopeful steps. Caleb worked harder than any of them, yet never appeared tired. When the sun dropped low, he would sit with the family by a small fire, telling quiet stories about patience, about seeds that took time to grow, about how the strongest structures were built slowly. No sermons, no pressure, just hands to work and space to believe. Faith, once spoken only in whispers, had found a new shape. It sounded like hammers. It looked like calloused hands, and for the first time in a long while, it felt real. The changes came quietly, almost politely, as if they didn't want to be noticed. One afternoon, near the end of the second week, a rotten beam gave way beneath Evan's weight. The crack was sharp and sudden. He fell hard, the air knocked clean out of his lungs, his body striking the dirt below with a sound that froze everyone in place. Rachel ran to him, fear tearing through her chest. Evan lay still, eyes wide, gasping, unable to speak. Caleb was there in seconds. "Don't move," he said calmly, already kneeling beside the boy. His hands moved with practiced certainty, checking Evan's back, his legs, his ribs. There was no panic in his voice, only focus. "It hurts everywhere," Evan finally managed. Caleb placed one hand firmly between Evan's shoulder blades. He closed his eyes, not long, not dramatically. "Heavenly Father," he murmured, so softly Rachel almost missed it. "This young man needs your healing. Ease his pain. Restore what's been shaken." That was it. No crowd. No raised voice. No spectacle. Evan was sore that night, stiff and shaken, but by morning he was sitting up. By afternoon, he was back on his feet, moving far better than Rachel thought possible. 2 days later, he was lifting boards again, slower, more careful but whole. Rachel watched in silence, something cold and electric running through her veins. It wasn't only Evan. Noah's fever faded without explanation. His appetite returned, small at first, then stronger. His laughter, something Rachel hadn't heard in weeks, came back in short bursts, then longer ones. Lily's nightmares eased. She slept through the night for the first time since the fire. During the day, she talked more, laughed more, even sang while working in the garden patch behind the barn. And Rachel herself began to notice something unsettling. The tight pain in her chest softened. The cough that had haunted her nights grew weaker. One morning, she realized she hadn't tasted blood in days. She didn't say anything. She was afraid that naming it would make it disappear. The garden, too, seemed to defy reason. Green shoots pushed through the soil far faster than they should have. Tomatoes swelled early. Herbs thickened, fragrant and alive. Caleb only smiled when Rachel mentioned it. "Good soil," he said, and steady hands. There were no announcements, no declarations of miracles. Only results. Healing that slipped in like dawn, slow, gentle, undeniable. Rachel began to understand something she had forgotten. Not all miracles arrive with thunder. Some come the way this one did, through work, through care, through a presence that never asked to be praised. And that realization unsettled her more than fear ever had. The moment came without warning, on a night when the work had finally paused and the barn stood quiet under a clear sky. A small fire crackled outside, its light dancing across newly set walls. The children were asleep inside, exhausted in the best way by effort, not hunger. Rachel sat on an overturned crate, rubbing her hands together, watching the flames. Caleb sat across from her, silent, as he often was. It was Evan who broke the stillness. "Why us?" he asked suddenly, staring into the fire. "Why help people you don't even know?" Caleb didn't answer right away. He looked at Evan with a depth that made the boy shift uneasily, as if something inside him had been gently uncovered. "You've been asking that question for a long time," Caleb said at last. "Long before you met me." Evan frowned. "You don't know that." Caleb's gaze didn't waver. "The night of the fire," he said softly, "you stood on the lawn holding Lily's hand. You told yourself you wouldn't cry. You told yourself it was your job now to protect them. You promised it, right there, with smoke in your lungs and sirens in your ears." Evan went still. Rachel felt the world tilt beneath her. "No one knows that," Evan whispered. "I never said it out loud." Caleb turned to Rachel then, his voice lowering. "And you," he continued, "went back inside the car the night you prayed and hid your cough so the children wouldn't hear it. You didn't ask to be healed. You asked that if someone had to fall apart, it would be you and not them." Rachel's breath caught sharply. Her hands began to tremble. "That was between me and God," she said, barely audible. Caleb nodded. "Yes." Silence pressed in, thick and heavy. "And Tom?" Caleb added gently. Rachel's head snapped up. "Before he went back into the house," Caleb said, "he looked at you and thought 3 things. Thank you for loving me. Forgive me for leaving you alone. And our love doesn't end here." Rachel's strength left her completely. She slid off the crate and fell to her knees, sobbing into the dirt. No one had ever told her that. No one could have known. Evan backed away slowly, his face pale. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice breaking. "What kind of man knows things like that?" Caleb knelt beside Rachel, his presence steady, unafraid. "I'm the carpenter who rebuilds what the world calls finished," he said quietly. "Not just homes, hearts." Evan's lips parted. The words caught in his throat before he could stop them. "Unless you're Jesus Christ." Caleb didn't correct him. He simply placed a hand over his heart, eyes filled with a compassion that felt older than time itself. And in that moment, the questions Evan had carried for 2 years finally found their answer. Not in explanation, but in presence. Morning arrived, wrapped in a quiet that felt sacred. Rachel woke expecting pain, the familiar pressure in her chest, the cough that stole her breath, but there was nothing. She sat up slowly, testing the air in her lungs. One deep breath, then another. Clear. Easy. She pressed a hand to her chest, stunned. Inside the barn, something else had changed. What had been rough and unfinished now felt whole. Sunlight poured through clean windows. The walls stood straight and warm. Simple furniture, solid, handmade, filled the space with a calm that felt earned, not given. A table set for a family, beds with fresh blankets, a kitchen stocked with food enough to share. Outside, the garden overflowed. Vegetables ripened beyond season. The earth seemed to breathe life. At the edge of the field stood a small wooden cross, plain and beautiful. When Evan stepped closer, he noticed faint markings carved into the wood hands, and at their centers, the subtle trace of nails. Caleb was gone. No footsteps, no truck tracks, only a folded note weighed down by a stone at the base of the cross. Rachel read it with shaking hands. "This home is yours. Every board was set with love. Live here in peace. Raise your children in faith. When you see someone who is hungry, cold, or losing hope, do for them what was done for you. I am with you always." The signature was simple. The carpenter. Years passed, but the miracle did not fade. Evan grew into a builder, opening his workshop to families who couldn't pay. He measured twice, cut once, and taught others the patience he had learned with a hammer in his hand and faith in his heart. Lily's voice filled their church, lifting prayers into song. She used her gift to gather help for neighbors in need, believing joy was meant to be shared. Noah grew strong and kind, organizing food drives at school, never forgetting what hunger felt like. And Rachel, healed in body and spirit, opened their table to anyone who knocked. The barn became a home, then a refuge, then a story told quietly from one family to another. Not everyone believed it, but those who saw the cross in the field, those who felt the welcome at the door, understood. Some miracles are loud, others build slowly, board by board, heart by heart, until a legacy stands where ruin once lived. If this story touched you, if you believe grace still finds us in ordinary places, please subscribe to Jesus Christ Encounters. Your support helps us share more true-to-heart stories that remind us we are never alone.